But you can call me the Riddler.
Why Jim Carrey's Riddler is criminally underrated. The current lineup of DC Comics movies, particularly Batman, are rife with controversy and discussion. Batman is undoubtedly the most popular, or at least the most recognizable superhero on the big screen, with 10 live-action feature films in the bag and many more to come. Things were different a decade ago when at least 2 of Christopher Nolan's 3 Batman films received near universal praise. It's 1995 again, and Batman fever is raging once more on the streets. Warner Brothers was hoping to maintain the momentum of its film franchise, but with a fresher and edgier approach with 2 successful pictures already. Tim Burton may have returned the Caped Crusader from a campy TV hero to a dark and brooding vigilante. Still, the following picture was a soft reboot in casting and production. Despite not being one of Bruce Wayne's strongest big screen excursions, Batman Forever remains the Dark Knight's most underappreciated film and deserves more praise. Although it was a box office success, the picture has not fared well with reviewers since its first release in 1995. It's dark and gothic and disgustingly decadent at the same time as it is bright, cheery, and conservative. Batman Forever has a habit of popping up at some point. Some people believe it is an underappreciated film. One individual in particular believes it is the lowest moment in the Batman film world to date. The 1995 summer blockbuster was perhaps one of the most overlooked Batman pictures, sandwiched between Tim Burton's Batman films and the train wreck Batman and Robin. Third installment of the live-action film series avoids the dismal tone of its predecessors, and Val Kilmer plays the heroic Caped Crusader. But sadly, the third part of the series is more focused on the absurd antagonist. Batman Forever isn't the finest film about Gotham City's Caped Crusader, but it's also not the worst. And while most people complain about how bad the movie is, you seldom hear individuals praise the film's positives. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin.
Yours is the greatest riddle of all. Can Bruce Wayne and Batman ever truly coexist?
Why Batman Forever's Riddler deserves more love. Tim Burton's Batman films are regarded as pioneering. Everyone adores Christopher Nolan's version, and Batman and Robin is a camp classic. But Batman Forever receives little acclaim, despite being fantastic. To begin, Val Kilmer has replaced Michael Keaton as Bruce Wayne. He gives a chaotic, aggressively 90s spirit to the character. Shoemaker's Batman film returns to the ridiculousness of the 1960s TV series. From the bat suit with nipples to the corny language. In its initial edit, the picture was on the verge of earning an R rating rather than PG-13. McDonald's promoted the film with a Happy Meal fast food item. After seeing the completed result, parents and Christian groups chastised McDonald's for advertising a distressing video to their children. While Shoemaker's films were cartoonish, Batman Forever featured a good mix of light and dark aspects, with the darker sections coming from Val Kilmer's troubled hero dealing with a dual identity and the emotional loss of his parents. By mixing components of Burton's vision with the shenanigans of the 1960s television series and finishing with 1995, you get a pleasant, somewhat cheerful, and aesthetically attractive film. Although the first 2 Batman films were huge box office successes, there was a perception following Batman Returns in 1992 that the series had become too dark and depressing. Batman was a reclusive neurotic. His opponents included the deformed Penguin, nurtured in sewers as a youngster. The films attempted to blend superheroes with film noir. That didn't work since the dark point is that there are no heroes. Furthermore, the significant villain's cartoonish conduct isn't as horrible as you recall. The film follows the tried and true formula of having Edward Nygma play a dissatisfied employee of Wayne Enterprises with an obsessive fascination with Bruce Wayne. We see Nygma morph from the awkward scientist to the deadly supervillain throughout the first act, as the shattered man steadily slips into madness before wearing the iconic green outfit emblazoned in black question marks. When you combine the sophisticated riddles used by the adversary to play with Bruce Wayne, you have a unique psychological aspect added to a summer movie. The innovative use of color and pop art resulted in a live comic book. The tone was arrogant and self-depreciating, but not so much that children couldn't appreciate the never-wink melodrama on its face. It was also so successful that it virtually single-handedly saved the Batman character from obscurity when Marvel was on the rise. It emphasized lesser-known villains like the Riddler, who had only featured in 2 stories before Frank Gorshin's Emmy-nominated performance, and Mr. Freeze, formerly known as Mr. Zero, as well as the Joker and Penguin. The images are the actual difference. Shoemaker opted for a candy-coated Gotham instead of Burton's dark, menacing Gotham. The film is an insane, in-your-face exhibition of colors and sceneries. Burton did the bizarre work, but everything in Batman Forever is repulsive and unpleasant, from the settings to the costumes. We learn more about Bruce Wayne's concerns and motives through a sequence of flashbacks, nightmares, and discussions. We are given a more in-depth look into the Caped Crusader from losing his parents at a young age, doing away with Jack Napier as the murderer from the 1989 Batman, to analyze Bruce's phobia of bats. The Riddler also employs Bruce's anxieties against him. A theme was revived in the 2005 reboot. This method would not be seen again until Batman Begins 10 years later. There was an art to using music videos as marketing vehicles for the major movies, and no one did it better than Seal with his song Kiss from a Rose from the Batman Forever album. The song and music video had something for everyone, strong lyrics for music lovers, and all of those fantastic Batman Forever footage for movie enthusiasts. It was unstoppable.
Knowledge is power. Then a god am.
Maybe Batman Forever is not as bad as we remember it. The film is the second sequel to Batman, and believe it or not, it was supposed to be better. Warner Brothers decided that Tim Burton's universe was too dark and dreary, so they hired a director who could give the series a happier tone. The picture isn't as wonderful or as dark as the previous two. Still, it is a vast improvement over Batman and Robin, which deserves no mention. Anyway, this is arguably the quickest and funniest film in the series, but there are some hit and miss components. Chris O'Donnell is as unpleasant and lifeless as Robin. Despite some great lines from Jim Carrey, the writing has flaws, and Nicole Kidman's part should have been written better. However, it is elegantly shot with Oscar-nominated photography and significant special effects. The direction is unexpectedly more efficient, and the action moves dizzily. The film plot revolves around a disgruntled Two-Face, a former district attorney played by Tommy Lee Jones. He becomes crazy after acid scars half of his face. He's a jerk. The film gives brains in the form of Edward Nygma. He uses a computer program to rename himself the Riddler and teams up with Two-Face to steal a lot of wealth to fund his nefarious agenda. The narrative this time is a basic Batman plot in which the Caped Crusader finds himself in the crosshairs of two diabolical villains who seek to drain Gotham City's collective IQ using a stupid contraption connected to the whole population's TV sets. Two-Face is on one side, and on the opposite end of the spectrum comes the Riddler, a character who rambles on and on and on for over 2 hours. Val Kilmer plays Batman this time, and he does a respectable job in a challenging role, especially with this writing. However, there is something stale about his act. He's entirely unsuitable for Batman. Kilmer established himself as a skilled comic in films such as Top Secret and Real Genius early in his career. That leads me to believe that he would have been better suited to play one of Batman's enemies, possibly the Riddler. As his subconscious transforms into the Riddler, Batman must confront the cleverest adversary he's ever encountered before moving on to more heinous actions. Tim Burton's gothic and morbid Batman, which debuted on June 23, 1989, was a reaction to the show's infantilization of the comic book medium, at least in the imagination of the press, who would constantly treat comic books in the bow, pam, whammy terms. The film's opening third was such an obvious homage to Pulp Fiction crime novels from 1920 to 1945 that Hollywood spent the following decade believing that viewers wanted new movies based on Dick Tracy, The Rocketeer, The Shadow, and The Phantom. While set in the present, the film depicts 1920s criminals in outfits, automobiles, and machine guns that are decidedly Untouchables era. One would welcome the screenplay's change of pace since there's no doubt that Wayne is the primary subject, and I kind of enjoyed that we had started to hear some of his psychological things dealing with his parents' death. This worked pretty well, which further had an amusing interaction with the Kidman character. Batman Forever is definitely trapped between two realities. It still wants to be the character study film that the previous two films in the franchise were, especially with Bruce Wayne's issues of needing Batman. Still, it also wants to be the comic book hoot and wink to the audience that the TV show was. It never finds a happy medium. Yeah, it's amusing in an eye-rolling sort of way. Batman's first sentence in the picture is about driving through a drive-thru with his Batmobile. Still, it's a reasonably empty film in the end. It's the failure to provide any depth to any of the characters. Batman appears to be a one-liner machine who occasionally appears distraught and offers half-assed speeches to Robin. At the same time, both villains are underutilized in their roles. Is Jim Carrey as the Riddler better than Paul Dano's? The Riddler is unquestionably one of Batman's most outlandish villains, which not only fits the tone of Schumacher's Batman films, but also Carrey's showy attention-grabbing antics. The Riddler has always been character-driven by his desire to be acknowledged for his self-perceived genius, so having Carrey's comedy function as an extension of that ambition works deeper. While some feel Carrey's Riddler intended to emulate the Joker, his comic skills contributed to a more nuanced version of the villain. The Riddler was the nickname used by criminal mastermind Edward Nygma. Nygma turned to crime after being rejected by his idol Bruce Wayne for one of his inventions. He exploited his scientific skills for evil, becoming a crazy, insane criminal who always marked his criminals with riddles. Given that the film is released by Warner Brothers, a branch of Time Warner that controls HBO and other cable sources, the Riddler's plot is one of the most hilarious aspects of Batman Forever. The Riddler wishes to duplicate the box atop every television set in Gotham. In Batman Forever, Jim Carrey's Riddler was a superb embodiment of evil, much better than Paul Dano's portrayal of the character in The Batman. While Joel Schumacher's Batman pictures had a lot to be desired in specific ways, they were not without value. In fact, selecting Jim Carrey as the Riddler in 1995's Batman Forever was one of the better moves Schumacher made in his Batman flicks. Jim Carrey is fantastic as the king of question marks and very much steals the entire movie, which grossed $336 million worldwide. The Riddler never appears to be particularly adept in outplaying Batman, and Two-Face is reduced to a gun-wielding visual gimmick. Bruce Wayne is also up against a psychotic employee called Edward Nygma, whose aspiration for a mind-controlling TV show has led him to adopting the guise of the Riddler. Carrey's Riddler struck the right note by balancing the actor's blankable humor and the character's comedic realism. Carrey is a terrific comedian, one of the best, a physical performer whose performance is a wonder of comic timing, so effortless that it appears to land on him as an afterthought. Carrey's performance in The Riddler is not one of the best, in fact, it's one of his worst. Carrey is allowed free reign over his performance thanks to a shaky screenplay, which is precisely the wrong approach. It didn't work in the Ace Ventura films, and it certainly doesn't work here. To keep his comedy in check, he needs a screenplay, a character, a narrative, and some ground rules. The Riddler is a mastermind scam artist who employs sophisticated puzzle games to keep Batman guessing. Since Batman Forever was focused on creating the dynamic of its heroes, its adversaries may have received less development than they needed. While Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face felt out of place, Carrey's Riddler was an intriguing figure who played an essential role in Batman Forever's narrative. The actor seemed to have been born to portray this character, and he brought him to life in a way that hasn't been reproduced since. This makes Carrey's Riddler the final iteration of the Riddler, maybe even better than Paul Dano's fresh take on the character in The Batman. Traditionally, he's an eccentric, comical figure, much more so than many of Batman's foes, and therefore integrating him in grittier, darker interpretations on the Dark Knight's narrative isn't easy. On the other hand, Carrey's Riddler embraced the campy wackiness of the comics Riddler. He was still a great scientist with a sharp and perceptive intellect. Still, he was also dangerous and insecure, which fit the character's ancestral past. Even Carrey's Riddler suit was more akin to the comic book's look, which Dano's Riddler costume in The Batman has moved away from. Overall, Jim Carrey successfully develops his reputation as an excellent Riddler. Irrespective of its flaws, Batman Forever's vibrant aesthetic, campy acting, and focus on Robin's tale remain underappreciated. Despite Joel Schumacher's significantly lighter take on the subject in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, Batman Returns remains one of the most excellent Batman pictures ever produced, overflowing with character, flair, and a surprising amount of conceptual substance. Is the movie more entertaining? It's perfect bubblegum for the eyes, to be sure. Fantastic effects and more significant, brighter settings capture a rich comic book appearance. This is undoubtedly the funniest of the series' 3 flicks. Schumacher's take on the back-suited vigilante is as wrong as it is terrific, as cluttered as it is impressive. So what are your thoughts? Tell us how you feel in the comments below. And if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. With that being said, have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.